Can everybody see the slideshow? Just a quick nod, thumbs up. Cool. Right on. So let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Higgins, but you can just call me Matt. That's fine. So today we'll be talking about presentation skills or the big pitch. I do also want to say, though, that the things that we'll be going over, these are presentation skills in general. The big pitch is a very specific kind of presentation and competition, but these are the characteristics of effective public speaking, kind of regardless of the setting. So first, just a quick preview of what we'll be going over. I'll remind y'all of just some of the key dates for the event. I'll tell you about myself, my background, and then we'll talk about the 3 characteristics of effective public speaking, which is being knowledgeable, being organized, and being engaging. And we'll go into those. And then we'll talk about some tips for practicing each one of those aspects of effective public speaking. And then we'll talk about some preparation. And hopefully, if I can move through this with some effective time management skills, we'll have some time left over at the end for questions and answers. But also feel free to type your questions into the chat as well. That will also work. So first, here are just the event details, just the dates. So the ones that I would suggest are the most important would be the video and PowerPoint slide deadline. So you have to have those completed and submit by Thursday, November 12th at 11:59 p.m. It doesn't say on there, but that's going to be Pacific time. I don't know if y'all are in California. I'm not, so keeping up with Pacific time has been a bit of a struggle for me. I actually almost showed up to this presentation an hour late because I was just struggling with time zones. So make sure you have a firm grasp on that. So then the preliminary round is going to be that following week, Monday, November 16th through Wednesday, November 18th. And then after that, it'll be the final, which is Friday, November 20th. You're uploading your videos onto YouTube, and then the judges are watching them from there. So yeah, that's just the details of the presentation. Now your content, 3-minute thesis, it's about an aspect from your work condensed into a 3-minute presentation. Pretty straightforward. So who am I? Again, my name is Matthew Higgins. You can call me Matt. I have a bachelor's and a master's in communication from the University of New Mexico. My bachelor's is interpersonal communication, so that's like one-on-one with another person. And intercultural communication is looking at how specific cultures communicate with themselves, but also with each other. Prior to graduate school, I was a basketball coach. I coached high school, college, and one-on-one with professionals. I also ran basketball camps and did coaches clinics as well. I actually stopped coaching to pursue my graduate degrees. And during my master's, I taught public speaking. I also taught nonverbal communication, and I taught intro to communication. And those were all classes for the Department of Communication and Journalism, but I also worked for the business department doing basically what I'm doing for CGU with the big pitch, one-on-one meetings to help students with presentations, also working with groups. I worked with business groups that were participating in business pitch competitions and also individuals who were participating in business pitch competitions. And another thing that I did in that job, or another facet of that job, was I was assessing students' public speaking growth. So one of the accreditations for the business department was that they developed their students' public speaking skills. So I would go watch every freshman presentation in the business department, and then I would go watch every senior presentation and assess the differences. And so the reason why I bring all of this up, my teaching experience plus my coaching experience, is to show not only that I have experience speaking, I also have experience analyzing speeches. And I also recently just got hired, actually like 3 days ago, to teach communication for Rice's business program. So I like teaching communication. I like teaching public speaking. I like to help people because public speaking kind of sucks, and I like to have it just suck a little bit less. And it's fun. And so I just really enjoy this. But the real reason why I bring up my background as a basketball coach is because I view public speaking pretty similar to basketball in the sense that it is a skill that if you practice it, you will get better at it. A lot of people feel like they're not good at public speaking, but they don't realize they actually haven't done it that much. Malcolm Gladwell created this idea of the 10,000 hours. You have to do something 10,000 hours to become an expert. Well, if you think about how many hours you've spent speaking in public, it's likely that it's going to be less than 100 hours. So there's really not a reason why you should be great at it, but you can be, because it's a matter of practice. It's a matter of just doing it more and more and more. And so that's kind of what today is about. It's about how we can practice and do more public speaking. So moving on. So in my time assessing speeches over the last 4 to 5 years, the things that I have learned, the 3 common characteristics of public speaking, and the reason why at the top of the slide it says characteristics of effectiveness is because this is true for speakers as a whole, but also for individual speeches. So effective public speakers, when they speak, they are organized, they are knowledgeable, and they are engaging. But that's also true for an individual speech. You may be a novice public speaker. You can still deliver a great speech if you are organized, if you are knowledgeable, and you are engaging. So let's look at what those mean. So organized is very similar to writing, where you're going to want to have 3 sections to your presentation: an intro, a body, and a conclusion. Now, the thing is you have to make sure that you're answering 3 questions with each one of those sections. The first question that you want to answer is, what is the topic? The second question that you want to answer is, what are the details? And the third one, which is the most important, is, what is the point? That's what I found to be lacking from the majority of freshmen or novice public speakers, is they don't clearly communicate what their point is, right? And for you doing a thesis pitch competition, your point is, why is your research relevant? Why does it matter? And that's the most important part. A lot of speakers, because speaking in public is anxiety producing, and that can be distracting. So your whole goal is to just get the information out there, and then you forget to say what your point is. So that's the starting point in organizing your presentation. You've got to answer the question first. What is my point? And then from there, you can start doing the rest of the organization. But again, it's about answering those 3 questions. Organize your presentation around those 3 questions. What is the topic? What are the details? And most importantly, what is my point? So let's move on to the next one, which is being knowledgeable. So being knowledgeable is more than just knowing your topic. It's also about knowing what your topic isn't. So a lot of times when we give our presentations, again, we're so focused on getting the information out there that we neglect to explicitly state what our point is. But sometimes that can be kind of confusing, because our thesis, we do so much research, we do so much work, and we find so many interesting things that it can get lost what our point is. And to help us pinpoint that, it helps to know what your point is not. So for an example, I'll use my own thesis. So my thesis was an investigation of the relationship between basketball culture and resilience. But in my thesis defense, one of my committee members asked me about athletic culture and resilience. Now, while athletic culture and basketball culture are close to the same thing, they're not, they're different. And my presentation was not about athletic culture. So these are very important for you to consider, is not just what is the point, but also what is not my topic, what my topic isn't. That can help you fine tune and stay on topic, and you'll be more knowledgeable that way because you're not going off on these tangents that are unrelated. So next, the presentation context. This is another important aspect of being knowledgeable that's really important. It's a little easier for y'all because you know what the context is. You know it's an online presentation where you're uploading a video onto YouTube. You know how long your presentation is. You don't need to know the order in which you're speaking because that doesn't matter. You don't need to know about this physical setting, but in a normal presentation, you'd want to know these things. You want to know how big your stage is so you can know how much room you have to move. You want to know who your audience is. You want to know as much as you can just about the context of that presentation. That helps you build your content, that helps you organize things, that helps you add in metaphors and anecdotes and things like that. So that's another aspect of being knowledgeable. And then the third one is about the presentation itself. And so what I mean by that is knowing the structure and the organization of your presentation. You should be able to tell people what each section is about. You know your introduction is about this. You know your body is about this. You know you're going to hit this detail, this detail, this detail. And you know what your point is and you know what your conclusion is. So knowing the organization and the structure is another aspect of your presentation where if you're very knowledgeable on it, it helps you appear and be a more knowledgeable presenter. And the way I like to think about this is kind of like a flight, an airplane. So your topic is a flight and you know that it's a plane going from one destination to the next. That's your topic. The context would be, where is the flight going? Who is on the flight? How long is it going to take? And where are you sitting on that flight? But knowing the presentation itself is a little bit further. It's about knowing the plane itself. It's about knowing where you're going and knowing things about where you're going to end up. So if you got on a flight and your pilot, they know it's a flight, they know where it's going, but they don't know about the plane, you might start to question how knowledgeable they are. But if they know these things, then you never question it, and it becomes a little bit more engaging of a presentation. So those are very important aspects about your presentation that you need to know that extend beyond just the topic itself. All right, so let's move on to engaging. So I went through the being organized and being knowledgeable a little quick. And that's partially because those things, they just kind of happen during the development of the presentation. They're a little bit natural to the process. What is a little bit more difficult to do is to be engaging. The way I like to think about being engaging is you're being a human being. A boring presentation is one that is robotic. It is a script. It is a person with a monotone delivery. They barely move. Again, it's not, engaging isn't about what it is, it's about what it's not. It's not robotic. Be a human being. And there's two different ways in which you can do this. So there's linguistically or verbally engaging. So that's your content. That's the topic, the information you deliver. And then there's also being engaging physically, non-verbally. So that's your non-verbal communication. And I'll go over each one of those. 1 second. Just checking on a couple of questions in the chat. For those of you that have asked questions in the chat, we'll get to those at the end. So I'm sorry if you feel like I've been ignoring those. I've been seeing them, but we'll get to those at the end. So again, being engaging, there's two aspects and you can be engaging, linguistically and physically. And it's about being dynamic across those factors of each one of those. And we'll get into those right now. So first, verbal engagement. Being verbally engaging is about balancing your storytelling techniques, right? So with your verbal delivery, you've got your topic information, but especially with the big pitch, we even have webinars talking about how to be verbally engaging, where you're adding metaphors, you're adding anecdotes, you're adding in human emotion, that human element to make your presentation more engaging on a human level. Instead of just presenting research, statistics, information, you're adding in metaphors, anecdotes, and human elements to make the content, the verbal linguistic content, more engaging. But it's not about just doing those things on their own. You can't just put in a metaphor and that's it. It's about the right balance. And there's no perfect balance. It's not like the perfect speech is 60% topic, 40% metaphor. It's about you and what your point is and how you want to tell that story. So verbal engagement is about being dynamic in how you tell your topic information and how you use metaphors, anecdotes, and that human emotion, that human element. Just real quick, there was a question in the chat about slides being available. Yes, they will be available. And also this is being recorded. So that will be available as well. And they'll be available tomorrow, I believe. Oops. Okay, so that's verbal engagement. Now, before we move into nonverbal engagement, we got to talk about the bridge between the two, which is your slides, your presentations. Now, I do want to say The information I have here is more general tips on how to build slides for any presentation. But there is an entire webinar that is about specifically your slide for the big pitch. You really want to lean on that. I watched it. It is great. It's going to tell you exactly what kind of slide you should build. These are just general information about slides. All right. Now, the thing is, slides can help or they can hurt, and it depends on how much stuff you put in them. And it's as simple as that. They have to be simple. So here's some general rules on how to keep them simple. 5 by 5 per text. So if you've got a slide with text on it, you should not have more than 5 lines on there, and you should not have more than 5 words per line. Now, obviously, sometimes it's not a hard rule where if you break it, your presentation goes straight to the trash, but it's a nice rule to help you keep it simple, keep it short, and to prevent you from having too much, because having too much is really bad. And it's the same for graphics. Just bring it down 4 by 4. Don't want to have a lot of graphics on there. And if you do have graphics that have text like explainers or definitions and titles, keep that limited as well. You want to keep your slides consistent. So don't change themes in the middle of a slide. That's distracting. And a nice rule of thumb, less is more. Your presentation slides, they're aids, they are more of a roadmap. They're not the information itself. People are there to listen, they're not there to read. So just real quick, here's 2 bad examples followed by 1 good example. Way too many graphics. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's just, you don't know what to read. You can barely even read some of it. You don't know what to pay attention to. It's just too much. This one gives me an instant headache. The graph itself is too busy, too much stuff. The text boxes, too much stuff. The fine print at the bottom, way too much. Audience members are going to see this, they're going to read it and stop paying attention, or they're going to pay attention and never even get any of the information that's from here. So that's just too distracting. So you want to keep it simple, right? You want to have just a few bits of information because you want the majority of the information to come from you as a speaker, not to come from your slides. And another reason why slides are bad is because you'll end up reading them as the presenter, and that's not good. But we'll get into that here in a minute. That's for a little bit later. So like I said, there's verbal engagement, and then we've got the bridge between verbal and nonverbal, which is the slides. We're done with that. So now we'll get into the nonverbal engagement. So again, this is the human factor. This is where we break free of our robotic chains. We are actual humans that are dynamic in how we speak and how our face moves and how our body moves. All of these things, they can help us or they can hurt us. And it's about that, finding that right balance. So these are the categories of nonverbal behavior that I want you to kind of think about as you're building and practicing your presentation. So you've got facial expressions, eye contact, body movement, hand gestures, volume, tone, and tempo, and then fillers and paralinguistics. Don't worry about if you don't have time to write all this down, because we're going to go through each one of these. You'll have time. You'll see down at the bottom left, this is why you should record yourself practicing. You may have gotten this advice several times in your life and not really known what to do with the recording. Pay attention to these kinds of things. That's what to do with the recordings. So a quick disclaimer though. I used to teach nonverbal communication, and one of the most important things to teach is that there isn't a dictionary for nonverbal gestures. I know we think that this means this every time, and this, they don't always mean the same things. Nonverbal communication is highly dependent on the culture of those communicating and the context in which it's being communicated. So a quick example, think of 2 22-year-old men hanging out watching football. They're best friends. One flips the other one off. That has a certain meaning that is different than if a 23-year-old intern at his work flips off his 85-year-old boss. Has a same gesture, it's putting up one finger, but the context and the culture have completely changed how those are received. And so the reason why I bring that up is because, again, nonverbal isn't a dictionary. It's not about doing this or doing that. It's about having the right balance. You can do too much of one thing. You can do too much of, or too little of another thing. So it's about finding that balance. So keep that in mind as we go through these. And you'll see that that's why on each slide it says avoid and do. It doesn't say never do this. It just says avoid it. First one, facial expressions. We read a lot in people's faces. You want to avoid a rigid and maintained expression. You want to avoid that mono face, right? Our faces move a lot while we speak. It's just how it is. Let it be. Don't feel like you have to stay serious. Don't feel like you have to stay a certain way. Just let your face do what it does. Avoid aggressive smiling. That's one of the first things that people notice about somebody that's just really just smiling at you. Like, you always feel that, and you can always, it's always off-putting. So try to avoid doing that too much. Now, with that being said, you do want to smile. You do. A slight smile goes a long way occasionally. So if you have just like this slight smirk the entire presentation, that might be kind of weird. But when you are making eye contact with people and you're talking about certain aspects of your research, have a slight smile. It makes a difference. It makes you feel more engaging. It makes you seem like you like your work. And that's key. If you seem like you hate your work, why should they pay attention to you? So if you want to be engaging, let your face do its thing. Allow for the range of expressions to happen, and just slight smile here and there. And that will go a long ways. And avoid just keeping the same rigid face the whole time. Moving on to eye contact. So you want to avoid looking away. I just say looking away. I don't say looking in a certain direction. Just avoid looking away too much. One thing that I tend to do a lot is I look off to this way when I'm speaking. So I have to constantly bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. You definitely want to avoid looking down. Part of the reason why you want to avoid that is because it now sends your volume, your voice downward, and you need it to go outward. So that's why you want to avoid having note cards and scripts, because you'll have that tendency to look. Now, the worst one is when you have a PowerPoint behind you and you turn completely away from your audience so that you can read that. That is the closest thing to a death sentence for a presentation that there is. But yeah, so with your eyes, you want to avoid looking away. Address your audience. That's very key. Now, in a physical, I guess a face-to-face, a real setting, a non-online presentation, one thing to consider is we naturally look more to our dominant side. I'm right-handed. I will naturally look more to my right side of the room, which will lead me to neglecting the other side. So if you're in a physical setting, make sure you're making eye contact with both sides of the room. It really helps. Oh, but for the online aspect, make sure you look straight into the camera. Zoom is so weird. I can't help but look at myself on Zoom when I'm talking. But we can kind of tell when the person isn't looking at the camera. So when you're doing your speech, recording your presentation, make sure you're looking right into the camera. That's your eye contact. So that'll really help. Again, so the things to do, make purposeful eye contact. Do it early, do it often. Find people in the room to make eye contact with them. It helps you because your audience now feels engaged. They are engaged by the speaker, so now they start to listen more. But it also helps you because when you make purposeful eye contact, it makes those awkward moments of eye contact less awkward. And I feel like if you've given a speech, you've had that moment where you accidentally locked eyes with somebody in the audience, didn't mean for it to happen, and you both feel it and you start getting a little weird because you've just made really intense eye contact with a stranger. And it becomes distracting, and now you're distracted because you're distracted. It can downward spiral. But if you take control of it and make that eye contact on your own, those problems kind of go away. It really helps with the anxiety too, to make that purposeful eye contact. You want to balance looking around, make sure you're hitting both sides of the room. For you guys as speakers, or for y'all as presenters, since you don't have a room, just make sure you're getting purposeful eye contact right into your camera. It just gives that human aspect, that connection aspect. You're speaking to the audience, and that will make a difference. Yeah, so that's that. If you see at the bottom left, or right there at the bottom, oculesics. So in the field of communication, that's the term for studying eye movement. I just think it's a really cool term, and I wanted to share that with you. So oculesics. And it also helps show that I am knowledgeable about my content. So next we've got body movement. Some things to avoid. Closing the self off. You don't want to deliver your whole speech with your arms folded in front of you. You don't want to have your hands in fists. That's kind of weird. You just want to keep yourself open. You don't want to turn away, those kinds of things. Keep yourself open and welcoming to your audience. Don't put your hands in your pockets. I once, when I was one of my first speeches, I had my hands in my pockets the whole time, and it was one of the weirdest things watching it on camera because we had recorded them. And the reason why you don't want to do some of those things is because if you notice you're doing it during the presentation, it becomes distracting. So just kind of let your body move how it moves. Record yourself speaking so you can see if you're moving too much, and then you can know to tone it back or if you're okay. You want to obviously avoid rigid and aggressive movements if you're like doing gestures, like if you're counting things, and 1, 2, 3, that's kind of distracting, right? So just be natural. Don't be aggressive, don't be rigid. And try to avoid body fidgets. So I have a tendency to lean on hips and sometimes stand on one leg. And I have found myself like losing balance in the middle of a presentation because I didn't realize I was standing on one leg. So I actually have a note right here in front of me that says 2 feet, reminding myself not to stand on 2 legs or 1 leg, because body fidgets, we all do it. We have our own unique ones. Try to pay attention to those. Tapping your foot could be very distracting. So the things you want to do are keep yourself open, keep yourself oriented to your audience. Don't turn away. Don't close yourself off. Move fluidly, just let it happen and be dynamic and try not to fidget too much. Moving on. Hand gestures. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but I use my hands a lot when I speak. It's just one thing to think about them is they can be a tool for you to help you emphasize certain things, to help you paint a picture, create an image, but they can be distracting. If you're doing too much, if you're just waving your hands, speaking, there is too much. But for the most part, they're really helpful in making you seem like an engaging, alive human being. One of the most distracting things is if a speaker just stands there rigid like a board and doesn't move. It becomes distracting. So again, record yourself. See what your hands do as they naturally move. If they're weird, then you can tone it back a little bit. But for the most part, they're probably going to be fine. Just let it happen. Now, one thing that you want to be sure with is that you're consistent in how you use them. So if you're using hands to do measurements, like really crude measurements, and you say you caught a 20-inch fish and you say it's that big, but then a minute later, a 20-inch puppy is this big, that can be distracting. So just keep them, make sure they're consistent. Keep your hands open, don't close them off. I know a lot of, there's advice for speakers to kind of clasp like this and keep them in front. That's fine, but you also don't want them to be there the entire time. You want to be dynamic, let them flow, let your hands move. It's part of being a human being. And just be mildly expressive and don't fidget. So I'm a fidgeter. I love click pens. I've also delivered a whole speech doing this, just clicking the entire time like a weirdo. So yeah, just make sure you don't, if you're a fidgeter, don't have anything nearby to fidget with. And those are the do's and the do's and avoids for hand gestures. All right, so next we've got volume, tone, and tempo. You've probably noticed a theme here where it's don't do the extremes, right? Don't move your hands like this and don't jump around with your body. Just don't do the extremes. It's the same for your volume, tone, and tempo, right? You don't want to be too loud and you don't want to be too quiet. You don't want to be too slow and you don't want to be too fast. Now, when it comes to being too fast, it's actually hard to be too fast as a speaker. There's been a lot of studies looking at how well we retain information from speakers that speak at a very high rate. There's not really a difference. We actually listen better to people that speak at an above average rate. So if you're worried about going too fast because your audience can't pay attention, that's not really going to be an issue. Unless, of course, you're a speed reader, then yes. But giving presentations, it gives us energy. We've got anxiety and we can't help how fast we speak. That's okay. Your audience will be able to listen. What would be an issue is if you were speaking so fast that you are no longer articulating. But like I said, that's a rare case. And if you record yourself, you can see how that happens and you can see kind of how to slow down. That's actually the thing for me that's the biggest. I actively have to keep myself from slowing down or keep myself from speeding up. I have to purposely be slow. And then also your tone. make sure you have a tone that mirrors the message that you're sending. So if you think about each one of these, how can I be dynamic with my volume, tone, and tempo? Think about them as tools to emphasize your points, right? So you can slow down your tempo when you need to make a very specific point, right? You've slowed it down. You've non-verbally communicated to your audience that important information is about to be delivered. But you can also speed up too, because you know you need to move on to the next point after building on that one. Same with volume. You can bring your volume up when you need to make a point. You can bring your volume down when you don't necessarily need to, right? So think of them as tools. Another example with tone, right? Imagine a friend, you deliver good news to a friend. And in one response, they say, "Are you kidding me?" But then another friend says, "Are you kidding me?" Those two tones right there have completely different messages. The first one emphasizes excitement and joy. The second one seems frustrated and angry. So you can use your tone to send a very specific message. So think about those things, right? Again, it comes down to recording yourself, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, seeing what feels well. And these are very important because you want to understand yourself. That's part of being knowledgeable, right? We want to be knowledgeable about our topic and our presentation, but you also want to be knowledgeable about yourself. Myself, as an example, my background is in coaching. Coaches are loud. We are in the gym yelling, and I like talking, so I get excited and start speaking really fast. So I know that I need to be quiet and I need to slow down a little bit. I also know that I get really jacked up on coffee. And so I know that I shouldn't have coffee before a presentation because then things get out of hand. So knowing yourself and knowing how to use volume, tone, and tempo to make points will really help you be an engaging speaker. Moving on to the last one. So this is fillers and paralinguistics. Fillers, the full word is filler terms or filler words. Paralinguistics are sounds that we make that aren't actual words, but they communicate in some sort of way. The most common example of a filler term is the word like. We all have had conversations with people that just keep saying like every 8 words. It becomes distracting, but that's not the only one. Very, pretty, really, that is a trio of filler terms that becomes distracting when overused. I have seen presentations and the presenter, today I'm going to be presenting some very interesting research that was pretty fun to do and really interesting to study. And it was very hard, but it was pretty enjoyable at the same time. You don't have to qualify everything. And if you keep doing it, it becomes distracting. You don't want just useless words to become a point of focus. So again, record yourself, try to pay attention to which ones you're using too much, which ones you're using a lot, and tone them back. Same with the paralinguistics, the uhs, the ums, the ers. Now, there's a reason why the next line is in the biggest font on this page, aside from the title. It is okay to have some of these. It's not about eliminating all of them. It is so hard to eliminate all filler terms from your speech. And it is so hard to eliminate all the paralinguistics, the uhs, the erms, the uhs. So don't worry about it. What you want to worry about is toning them back. Even if they're a problem, it might not be a problem for you. You may record your presentation the first time and see that you didn't do it very much. Awesome, then move on. But if you have a lot of them, these are the things that you want to tone back. Don't look for just these words and just these sounds. Look for redundancy. It might be a word that is relevant to your topic, but you might just be using it so much that it in itself becomes distracting. Like I said, my thesis was about the relationship between culture and resilience. And so I often had to write in my thesis the word adversity, and it just became distracting. So then I tried to replace it with challenges, and then challenges became distracting. So when you're looking for these filler terms in paralinguistics, pay attention to the ones that are repetitive and redundant. And that's how you can be more engaging and eliminate those distractions from non-necessary words. Cool. So just to sum those up, that was all of them. So the nonverbal behavior, the nonverbal codes, these are the aspects that contribute to us being engaging speakers. And the ones we talked about were facial expressions, eye contact and eye movement, body movement, hand gestures, volume, tone, and tempo, and fillers and paralinguistics. And the ways that we tend to these is through recording ourselves while we're practicing. Dynamism, being dynamic across how we use these. We're not always loud, we're not always quiet. We flow back and forth between the two. Sometimes we use our hands, sometimes we don't. We flow back and forth between. That's what engaging is. It's being dynamic in our verbal content, our information and our metaphors and our anecdotes, but it's also being dynamic in how we use our nonverbal communication, right? So those are the aspects. And again, it's about being dynamic across them. But like I said, there's no rigid formula. There's no exact way to do it. So it's about finding the balance that's right for you. And the only way to do that is to practice, 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 and record yourself while you're practicing. So speaking of practice, let's move on to actual ways to practice these things. So we'll talk about ways to practice these things, each one of these 3 characteristics of effective public speaking. Now, general rule of thumb for practicing presentations here off to the left on the slide, a minimum of 3 times per minute. This is the minimum. So y'all know that your speech is 3 minutes. The absolute minimum amount of times that you should practice your presentation is 9 times, 3 times per minute. It's not a real rule. It's not like if you do it 8 times, you won't do a good job. But it's a nice, I guess, template for you to use when you're practicing. You know that you should practice a lot of times, right? The best way to think about it is 3 times per minute. But I actually find what to be the most beneficial is just having conversations early on. Have conversations about your presentation. Call a friend or anybody. You can have conversations with me. This is one of the things that I'm here for. Just talk about what your presentation is. Talk about the topic, the details, and the main point. And the reason why is because in thesis work, in our research, we spend so much time just in our head and on our keyboards that's where the information is stored. But to articulate it is a completely different process. And we haven't had much time and opportunities to articulate it. So we've got to practice that. And it doesn't have to be in presentation format every single time. It's actually better to articulate it in different ways so that you're just really comfortable with the act of saying the things that you want to say. That's why we leave certain situations thinking, oh, I should have said that. But if we practice articulating those thoughts, feelings, and messages beforehand, it's easier to say the things that we want to say. So have conversations, and then again, record yourself. It always feels weird the first couple of times, but then after that, it doesn't feel weird at all. So to practice your organization and being knowledgeable, it's essentially about quizzing yourself, right? So you want to be able to answer these questions quickly. What's my topic? What are the details? And most importantly, what is my point? You want to be able to answer those quickly and easily. If you can do that, you're pretty much good to go. Now, about being knowledgeable, same thing, just quiz yourself, right? Are you familiar with the individual sections of the presentation? Do you know what you're going to say in the introduction? Do you know what you're going to say in the body? Do you know what your second main point is? Do you know your transition into the conclusion? Do you know all the pieces to your metaphor? Do you know the pieces to your anecdote? Quiz yourself, right? Write those questions down on flashcards. Organize them, pull one out, answer the question. Really challenge to see if you know these pieces of your presentation. And then do the same thing with the context of the presentation. Quiz yourself on who the audience is and how your presentation is going to be delivered and how long it's going to be, right? So it's about finding those pieces that contribute to being organized and being knowledgeable, and then just quizzing yourself. So practicing engagement. You've got verbal engagement and you've got nonverbal engagement. And basically it comes down to, you want to practice individual sections, record yourself, and in those individual sections, focus on specific nonverbal behaviors. So I suggest getting flashcards, write down introduction, main point 1, main point 2, main point 3, metaphor 1, metaphor 2, conclusion. Write those down, and then on separate set of flashcards, write down eye contact, hand gestures, body movement, volume. Pull them at random. You've got introduction and volume. So you recite your introduction and you pay attention to your volume. You do some sections really loud, and then you do some sections really quiet. And then you do some sections at the perfect volume. So you find what's wrong, but you find what's right. You record yourself. And you do that for all of them. That way you see what it feels like to do the wrong hand gestures, but you also see what it's like to do the right ones, right? So it's about creating this combination of practicing the material while also practicing the nonverbal gestures. So don't just record yourself and see what you do. Be intentful, be purposeful about using nonverbal gestures, be purposeful about the ways that you recite your material and combine them. So maybe you start off doing your introduction only and practicing eye contact only. And then on the next one, you do introduction, main point one, and you do eye contact and volume. And then for the next one, you do intro, body, conclusion, and then you start peppering in hand gestures, volume, and tempo. So you're doing all these different practice sessions where you're reciting the material while also practicing using your body. So the reason why you want to do that, there's 3 reasons actually. So one, you're practicing articulating your material. That's huge. But you're also practicing the organization of it because you're doing very certain small pieces. So you know that piece comes before this one and after that one. But you're also practicing just using your body, doing certain things, doing specific hand gestures and specific tone changes and specific tempo adjustments. You're practicing those very specific things. Now, the 3rd reason why it's important to do this, and this is the most important, is because you're getting practice doing both at the same time. You're practicing reciting your message while also controlling your body at the same time. Because if you can effectively do those, that's what makes you an engaging speaker. You don't want to recite and then do gestures. You have to do both at the same time. And it can be very confusing to talk and use your body at the same time. So the more you practice it, the better you'll be at it. So that's why it's about practicing specific sections with specific gestures, recording it and seeing how it goes, and then putting it all together into one comprehensive whole presentation. So now we'll move on from practice into preparation. Preparation. This is to me more about the day, the moments leading up to the presentation. It's about trying to bring your anxiety down a little bit. We're all anxious speaking in public. I was so nervous before this. It's like the 7,000th time I've done this kind of stuff. I'm still nervous. That's just how it is. But part of the reason why we're nervous is because there's a loss of control in public speaking. We're standing in front of strangers delivering information that is personal and important, and we have no idea what they're thinking about us. That's hard. We've lost control of the situation. So to bring your anxiety down, start taking control of things that you can control. Now, the thing is there's no one thing that you can do that makes your anxiety go away. But if your anxiety is a 10 and you take control of one thing and it brings it down to a 9.5, that's pretty good. And then you do something else, bring it down to an 8.2, that's not bad. So you do all these small things and your anxiety is less than it was. That's what we want. That's how we prepare. So first, attire, right? With this presentation, you know you have to wear business casual. Wear your favorite business casual. And also make sure that your clothes are the way that you want them to be. If you like a really finely pressed shirt, iron your shirt. Make sure you do it. Wear your favorite tie. I like to wear something that is one of my favorites every time I do a presentation, if I can. There's only so much you can control. But it really makes a big difference. It helps your confidence. It gives you a sense of control. Food and drink, like I said, I love coffee, but I have to really make sure I don't drink coffee before a presentation because then I get so nervous, I get hot and sweaty and distracted, and it's just not good. So, eat something that you really like, but eat something that it helps you feel good, right? Do what you can to make yourself feel good before a presentation. The less nervous you are, the easier it'll be to actually say the things you want to say and have a good time and be engaging. For y'all as speakers, since you're doing it, you're recording it and uploading it, you have complete control over your physical setting. Set it up exactly how you want. I spent like an hour today trying to figure out how to set up my apartment for this. I have lamps all over the place. I made sure all my plants are right next to me just because I like it. It helps. Those little things really help. Practice using your technology, especially if you're delivering a group presentation where there's going to be slides. Know who's operating slides and those kinds of things. If you need to do some updates, make sure your stuff is updated so your computer doesn't restart in the middle of a presentation, those kinds of things. Now, the next 3 are kind of the same thing for me, and they're actually the most important. Take control of how you speak to yourself. One of the things that I have found in my life to be the most common amongst all human beings is we are mean to ourselves. We are meaner to ourselves than we are to the other person, at least. So when you're preparing for your speech, pay attention to how you're speaking to yourself. Speak to yourself as if you were speaking to your 10-year-old self, right? So we're nervous before a speech and we might think, hey, don't mess this up. This is gonna suck. This is gonna be horrible. I hate this. You wouldn't say that to your 10-year-old self. You would be encouraging and supportive and kind. And you could do the same thing to your adult self. And it really makes a big difference before your presentation. But also do it after your presentation, right? You walk away, give yourself some credit, give yourself some props. Public speaking sucks, it does. It's nerve-wracking, it's hard, it's stress-producing. And when you do it, good job. So be nice to yourself. Take some deep breaths. It's part of being nice to yourself, it's part of caring for yourself. And lastly, treat yourself. If you can, do something nice for yourself on the day of a presentation. These are all little things that we can take control of that help bring that anxiety down piece by piece by piece by piece. And that sense of control also brings your confidence up, and that will help you be an engaging speaker. So these are this is my advice for you in terms of preparing after you've done all of that practice. Ooh. Oh yeah, no, so that's it. I do want to summarize real quick. I forgot to put in a summary slide. To remind y'all, we went over the 3 aspects of effective public speaking, which is being organized, it's being knowledgeable, and it's being engaging. Organized is about answering 3 questions. What's my topic? What's the details? What's the point? Knowledgeable is about being knowledgeable about 3 things. You know your content, you know the context of the presentation, and you know the structure and organization of the presentation itself. And then being engaging falls on two categories. Verbally engaging, which is the content itself, how well you're using topic information with metaphors and anecdotes. And then there's non-verbally engaging, how we're using our eye contact, our hand gestures, our voice, our body, those kinds of things. And with engaging, again, there's no perfect formula. It's about finding the right balance. So for practicing, you want to break your stuff into small sections and purposely practice that in accordance with the non-verbal stuff. And to prepare, be nice to yourself and take control of the things that you can.